Hello everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We have an exciting news story to share, so let's get started. Over the past 6 months, Ben found himself living a life that seemed unfamiliar and lacking in fulfillment. His marriage with Kathy, once brimming with warmth and joy, now felt like a mere shadow of its former self. Kathy's laughter, which used to uplift him during tough times, had disappeared. The comforting touch that once made him feel cherished and grounded was now a distant memory. Kathy had distanced herself, displaying changes in behavior that Ben could no longer overlook. Their once lively conversations, filled with dreams and shared jokes, had devolved into mundane discussions about groceries, bills, and current events. The emotional and physical closeness they once shared had dissipated. Ben's efforts to bridge the growing gap between them were met with apathy or outright rejection. He vividly remembered a recent attempt to connect by gently resting his hand on hers while watching a movie, only to have her swiftly pull away, uttering. In the quiet stillness of the night, Ben found himself wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The excuse of exhaustion he had previously used felt empty as he reflected on the distance that had grown between him and Kathy. Memories of their early days together played in his mind like a bittersweet yet haunting film. In those days, Kathy had been more than just his wife. She had been his closest companion, his confidant, his everything. They had shared dreams, laughter, and plans for the future. But now, it seemed as though she had closed off to him completely, building an impenetrable wall between them. The uncertainty weighed heavily on Ben as he tried to make sense of it all. What had changed? Had he unknowingly done something to cause this rift? Or was it something he had failed to do? He spent hours agonizing over their past, trying to pinpoint the moment when their happiness had started to crumble. However, Kathy remained tight-lipped. Whenever he tried to broach the subject, she brushed him off with a terse response, insisting that everything was fine. Her words stung, her avoidance cutting deeper than a mere rejection of conversation. It wasn't just her silence that pained him. It was the growing feeling that Kathy no longer cared. The affection she used to give so freely had vanished, leaving Ben feeling abandoned and alone. He tried everything to reignite the spark they once shared, planning romantic evenings, surprising her with small gestures, even suggesting counseling. But each effort was met with the same excuses: too busy, too stressed, too tired. After months of trying, Ben was starting to doubt whether there was any hope left for them. He had reached his breaking point. The silence, the unanswered questions, and the widening distance between them had become unbearable. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Tonight, he resolved to confront the tension head-on. No more avoiding the issue, no more brushing things under the rug. He needed answers, even if they risked unraveling everything. After dinner, he found Kathy in the living room, scrolling absently through her phone. Her expression was distant, her focus elsewhere. For a moment, Ben hesitated under the weight of, with heavy doubt weighing on his chest. Ben gathered every ounce of courage he possessed and stepped forward. "Kathy, we need to talk," he began, his voice steady yet tinged with weariness. She hardly looked up from her phone. "Can it wait, Ben?" "I'm busy," she responded, her tone indifferent. "No, it can't," he insisted, moving to stand in front of her. "I can't continue living like this, unsure of what's happened between us, unsure of what's happened to you. I need to understand what's going on." Sighing, Kathy set her phone down, her arms crossed defensively. "What now?" she asked, her tone guarded. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Ben spoke up. "It's about us, about how distant you've been these past 6 months. You've shut me out emotionally and physically, making us feel like strangers sharing a home. I need to know why," he explained, hoping to keep his emotions in check. Kathy's expression hardened, and she shook her head dismissively. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she retorted sharply. Frustration boiling over, Ben couldn't help but respond. "Overthinking, you call it." Ted's voice rose with frustration as he confronted Kathy about their lack of physical intimacy. He expressed his feelings of disconnection and her refusal to engage with him, questioning why she seemed to treat him as an outsider in her life. Seeking an explanation as her husband, Ted felt bewildered by Kathy's distant behavior. In response, Kathy coldly explained that her body was her own, emphasizing the importance of permission before any physical contact. She asserted her independence and boundaries firmly, pushing back against Ted's expectations. The impact of her words left Ted speechless, struggling to comprehend this new dynamic in their relationship. Expressing his confusion, Ted tried to make sense of the changes he had observed in Kathy over the past 6 months, feeling like she had transformed into a different person. However, Kathy remained resolute in her stance, asserting her autonomy and demanding respect for her decisions. Ben was left reeling with the realization that the woman he thought he knew had evolved into someone he no longer recognized beneath him. The ground had shifted. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, now felt like a stranger, uttering words that were foreign and strange. "Kathy," he murmured, his voice quivering with disbelief. "What are you saying? I've never treated you disrespectfully. I've always respected your freedom and made compromises for you. Have you been influenced by some radical ideas?" In response, her eyes blazed with anger. "There it is," she retorted. "You're already accusing me, trying to diminish me, portraying me as irrational. And let's not pretend I don't understand the real reason behind this. You're upset because I've stopped being intimate with you. That's all men like you care about, your desire." Overwhelmed, Ben covered his face with his hands, attempting to make sense of her unfounded allegations. Frustration mingled with hopelessness as he wondered if there was anything salvageable in their relationship. When he lifted his head to look at her, his expression revealed a mix of agony and exhaustion. "All right, Kathy," he said laboriously, his tone weighed down with resignation, "if that's how you see it. If you want to frame it, then here's my response. My wallet is my choice, my money is my choice. So here's the deal. You're going to get a full-time job and pay half of our expenses. How's that for respecting choices?" Kathy's face contorted with rage. "That's manipulation," she shouted, her voice rising. "Ben, you're acting like an abuser. I knew you'd resort to blackmail and try to control me emotionally," Ben shot back, throwing his hands up in disbelief. "Kathy, I don't even know who you are anymore. When did you lose yourself like this?" Kathy jumped to her feet, trembling with fury. "This is exactly why I've changed," she snapped, "because men like you think they can gaslight women into submission." Ben stood as well, his own anger finally boiling over. "Gaslight me? I've spent months trying to save this marriage, trying to figure out what's wrong, trying to fix it. And all you've done is shut me out and treat me like I'm the enemy." A tense silence filled the room, both of them breathing heavily as the confrontation hung in the air. Their anger clashed like a fierce storm. Ben felt a deep, overwhelming sorrow seep in, heavier than anything he had experienced previously. It was no longer a marriage but a battleground. Unable to bear looking at her, he turned away. For the first time, the notion of divorce didn't feel like a defeat, but rather an escape. The following morning, following the intense confrontation, Ben found himself parked outside a lawyer's office, gazing at the sign for White and Associates. His stomach churned as he grappled with the gravity of his impending actions. Ben wasn't one to act impulsively, but the idea of enduring a loveless and hostile marriage for the rest of his life was unbearable. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Trevor White, welcomed Ben with a firm handshake and a composed, professional attitude. Over the next hour, Ben poured out his frustrations, recounting Kathy's erratic conduct, emotional and physical withdrawal, and adoption of peculiar beliefs that had undermined their connection. Trevor listened attentively, diligently taking notes as Ben spoke. Trevor leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses thoughtfully. "It's a challenging situation," Trevor started, speaking in a measured tone, but not entirely rare. Significant personality changes and avoidance of communication could be indicative of external influences. It could be related to an ideology she's deeply invested in, or could have a more personal origin. Ben's expression darkened, a tight feeling forming in his stomach. "Personal? Are you suggesting there may be someone else involved?" Trevor replied with a casual shrug. "That's a possibility, but let's not jump to conclusions. It's crucial to consider practical steps before assuming anything. You have choices. We can begin drafting the divorce papers now, or you can take time to observe the situation." Understanding the underlying issues could offer insight and an advantage if legal action is needed. Ben nodded thoughtfully, taking in the advice. Let's postpone the paperwork. I want to see how things develop first. In the evening at home, Ben sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, carefully calculating their monthly expenses. This included the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and other essentials. After totaling the sum, he divided it in half. While the share was already covered by his income, he made a note of the precise amount that Kathy would need to contribute for her share. Ben then retrieved a small wooden box from the closet and prominently placed it on the kitchen counter, conveying a clear message. Later, as Kathy entered the kitchen, she saw Ben seated at the table with his notebook. Calmly, he presented her with a breakdown of their monthly expenses. I've taken care of my half, he explained. The box is there for you to contribute yours. Kathy paused, her expression turning questioning. What does this mean? She inquired. Ben replied evenly, it means you've mentioned wanting independence and boundaries. I'm respecting that. If we're equal partners in this marriage, we should equally share the household responsibilities. A flush of emotions ran across her face as she snapped red with anger. This is manipulation. You're punishing me because I won't play the role of the perfect wife. No, Kathy, Ben said, his tone steady but firm. I'm respecting your choices, but independence comes with responsibility. I've carried the financial burden of this family for years without complaint. If our dynamic is changing, then our arrangement needs to reflect that. His voice rose. You know I don't have a job that pays like yours. This is unfair, Kathy protested. Ben didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time for that to change, he replied, gesturing toward the box. You have until the end of the month. Kathy stormed out, muttering accusations of manipulation and emotional abuse. Ben didn't follow her. He stayed seated, feeling a strange mix of detachment and exhaustion. He wasn't angry anymore, just drained. In the following weeks, Ben watched Kathy closely. Outwardly, she seemed to be coping, but it was clear she had no intention of making meaningful changes. She frequently complained about Ben's unreasonable demands. Kathy showed no interest in searching for a higher-paying job, choosing to spend her days scrolling through social media or chatting on the phone, all the while ignoring the wooden box in the corner. Ben refrained from confronting her directly and instead observed her behavior as if studying an experiment. What stood out to him the most was the palpable resentment simmering within her. Kathy, once known for her pride, now displayed a twisted form of it in the shape of stubborn defiance. Whenever Ben brought up even minor concerns, she would quickly deflect by accusing him of being controlling. As the end of the month drew near, the box remained empty, much to Ben's disappointment. He had held out a glimmer of hope that Kathy would seize the opportunity to demonstrate her dedication, but instead, he witnessed her refusal to engage with their shared reality. When the time came to pay the bills, Ben found himself once again at the kitchen table with the notebook and untouched box before him, dreading the impending confrontation. He called Kathy into the kitchen, and she entered moments later with her arms crossed and a sour expression. The bills are due and the box is still empty. If we don't pay, we'll face late fees and penalties. Kathy's scowl deepened. I'm aware, she snapped. Stop nagging me then. What's the delay? Ben asked, his voice calm but firm. We agreed you'd cover your half. Her face turned red, and her voice rose. Unbelievable, Ben. A real man handles the finances, not throws it back on his wife. You're pathetic. Ben's jaw tightened, but his tone remained measured. A real partner doesn't ignore her responsibilities. You push for these boundaries, Kathy. I've respected them, now it's your turn. Kathy's eyes burned with fury, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. Ben could hear her rummaging through drawers and muttering under her breath. Nearly 30 minutes later, she returned with a handful of cash and loose change. She dropped it into the box with a loud clatter, her voice dripping with sarcasm. They're happy. That's all I've got. Ben glanced at the box, then back at her, his expression unreadable. Thank you, said quietly, but Kathy wasn't finished. You're just like every other selfish man, she hissed, obsessed with control and money. Ben didn't respond. He'd learned by now that engaging further was futile. Instead, he leaned back, watching her silently. The morning air was crisp as Ben stood in the kitchen, sipping his coffee. His phone rested on the counter. He had called Trevor earlier, finally making the decision he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Get the papers ready," he said, his voice steady but resigned. "It's time for a divorce." Trevor responded, his tone both professional and sympathetic. "The papers will be ready in a week." A week felt like just the right amount of time. It gave Ben the opportunity to observe Kathy and confirm what he already suspected. Their marriage was beyond repair. It also allowed him to prepare himself emotionally for the inevitable confrontation. He planned to hand her the papers personally, not out of spite, but because he wanted closure. The suffocating tension that had gripped their home lingered throughout the week, allowing Ben to observe Kathy's behavior more closely each day. He was surprised to see that she appeared to be gradually calming down, with fewer angry outbursts and sharp retorts, and instead, a more withdrawn and pensive demeanor. Despite the outward calmness, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. When the papers were finally prepared, Ben felt a mix of relief and apprehension as he collected them from Trevor's office that afternoon. He spent the rest of the day pondering the situation, knowing that this was the beginning of the end. Holding the envelope on his lap at his desk, he envisioned the evening ahead, bracing himself for the difficult moment when he would hand the papers to Kathy, signaling the conclusion of a chapter in their lives. Evening had fallen. The usual time Kathy arrived had long passed, almost 2 hours late. Ben hardly looked up at her entrance, but something about her demeanor caught his attention. She appeared different, her body language more relaxed, her expression gentler. The pent-up anger that had consumed her seemed to have vanished. Instead, she offered him a tentative smile. "Hi," she greeted softly, placing her bag down. Ben responded with a cautious greeting, observing her closely. She moved around the kitchen with a newfound fluidity, fetching a teapot and rummaging the cupboards for tea bags. "I thought I'd make us some tea," she said, her voice carrying a hint of timidity. "It's been a while since we've just talked." Ben raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her unexpected gesture. "Tea?" he questioned. Kathy nodded, placing 2 mugs on the table. "I found some sweets in the pantry. Thought it might be nice to sit down for a bit." Her smile widened, and Ben felt a subtle shift in his perception. This wasn't the Kathy he had known for the past few months. At 6 months, it seemed as though she had rediscovered the essence of the woman he had once married. As he sat at the table, observing her pour the tea and delicately arrange the sweets on a small plate, he expressed his gratitude as she handed him a mug. "Thank you," he responded cautiously. "This is unexpected, I know," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "I've been reflecting a lot on everything." Ben felt a flutter in his heart. Though he wanted to press her for clarity, he restrained himself and opted to take a sip of tea, silently waiting for her to elaborate. Their conversation commenced with light chatter about the children, the weather, and a neighbor's recent purchase of a new car. However, as time passed, Kathy appeared to gradually open up, her tone becoming more affectionate and reminiscent. Despite this, Ben couldn't shake the sense that something was amiss. Her abrupt change in demeanor and the gentle undertones felt too deliberate. His thoughts raced, trying to decipher the situation. Had she uncovered his intentions? Was this an effort to salvage their relationship? Tingly, comfortingly routine for the past month and a half. His once shared bed now a distant memory. The sound of the shower running in the background was oddly comforting. But when Kathy emerged from the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel and her face, Ben was taken aback by Kathy's unexpected change in demeanor as she softly requested him to return to their bedroom that night. Caught off guard, he struggled to process her warm invitation. However, with his mind preoccupied by thoughts of giving her divorce papers, he declined, citing his exhaustion and the upcoming busy day. Despite his refusal, Kathy's response carried a hint of disappointment as she bid him good night, and left him pondering the sudden shift in their interaction, leaving Ben feeling perplexed and disturbed for the rest of the night. After the shift, He felt the sense of intentionality, as though he was part of a game he had not realized was being played. His curiosity tugged at him, drawing him further into the uncertainty she had introduced. With the first light of dawn peeking through the curtains, Ben reached a decision. No more hesitations, no more doubts. In the morning glow filling the kitchen, he sat at the table with a steaming mug of coffee in hand, the envelope containing the divorce papers beside him, a silent yet firm reflection of his resolve. Kathy entered with light steps, exuding brightness and cheerfulness. "Good morning, honey," she greeted him in a sweet and warm voice. "Morning," Ben replied, maintaining a composed and neutral tone. As she poured herself a cup of tea and took a seat across from him, her demeanor seemed overly pleasant. After some casual conversation, her mood subtly shifted. Glancing at him from the corner of her eye, her voice became more tentative. "You know, Ben," she started, almost playfully, "this might sound a bit." Ben carefully placed his coffee cup on the table, his gaze sharpening as reality sank in. It was clear to him now. The warmth, the sudden kindness were all part of Kathy's plan. She needed money, and she was using her role as a loving wife to manipulate the situation. Sitting back in his chair, he observed her closely. "So $150, huh?" Ben said calmly, his eyes fixed on her. "Well, Kathy, I have something even more valuable." Intrigued, Kathy's eyes lit up as she joked. "Better than $200? $500? Ben reached for an envelope and pushed it towards her. "This," he said simply. Kathy's laughter faded as she opened the envelope, revealing the divorce papers inside. Confusion turned to shock, then panic as she looked up at Ben, her voice trembling. "Ben, what is?" Ben met her gaze with a calm but firm expression. "Yes, it is. I've served you with divorce papers," he replied evenly. "After much consideration, I've come to the realization that our marriage is beyond repair." Her hands trembled as she held the documents, her eyes scanning the room as if seeking a lifeline. "Ben, this is so sudden," she pleaded. "We can't simply throw everything away like this. Let's give it another try. I can change, just please give me an opportunity." Ben shook his head, his determination unwavering. "Kathy, it's too late for that. I've spent months trying to understand where things went wrong, attempting to mend our relationship, striving to bring us back to what we once were. But every time you pushed me away, treated me as insignificant, like a stranger in our own home. And now, when you need something from me, you try to act as the loving wife I remember. However, I see beyond that facade." Kathy reached out, her voice filled with desperation. "Ben, you don't comprehend," she beseeched. "I've been facing so many challenges. I never intended to hurt, thank you. I just needed some time to sort things out." Ben sighed, his voice steady yet laced with sadness. "Please don't do this." Kathy's eyes filled with tears as she listened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want this. I've had ample time to reflect on our marriage, on how you've treated me these past months, the distance, manipulation, and coldness." Ben continued gently but firmly. "This isn't healthy for either of us. We deserve better. I can't continue living like this." As Kathy looked down at the papers, Ben stood up, taking his coffee mug with him. "I don't want this either," he said. "But it's the only way forward. You can take your time with the papers, but my decision is final." With those words, Ben walked away, leaving Kathy staring at the envelope, her world coming undone in her hands. In the following month, the divorce proceedings proved to be the most challenging period of Ben's life. It was a grueling ordeal marked by legal battles, emotional strain, and Kathy's persistent attempts to reconcile. She cried, pleaded, and made promises to change. But Ben remained steadfast. Too much damage had been done. Trevor White, Ben's seasoned lawyer, was a beacon of support during this time. With years of experience in family law, Trevor approached the case with precision and determination. Together, they crafted a strategy that ensured Ben's financial stability and protected the assets he had worked so hard to build. Kathy, however, was at a disadvantage. Her part-time job offered little financial independence, and her arguments for a more favorable settlement quickly unraveled under Trevor's sharp scrutiny. As the legal process dragged on, the strain on Kathy became evident. Her attempts to negotiate fell apart, leaving her with far less than she had hoped for. For Ben, the divorce was both liberating and bittersweet. He had freed himself from the suffocating tension of their marriage, but the weight of what had been lost lingered. The unexpected truth. Months later, Ben was standing in line at the grocery store when a familiar voice caught his attention upon spotting Maria, a former coworker of Kathy's. Ben engaged in a friendly exchange with her. Their conversation revolved around mundane topics until Maria casually mentioned something that caught Ben off guard. "Work has been hectic without Kathy," Maria remarked, leading Ben's heart to race. She went on to describe Kathy's inconsistent attendance and her frequent absences, hinting at a possible romantic connection Kathy had mentioned in the past. Ben, puzzled, inquired cautiously, prompting Maria to reluctantly reveal that Kathy had spoken about a man in a way that hinted at more than a friendship. The truth struck Ben abruptly, leaving him shocked. Grappling with a mix of emotions, including anger and a peculiar sense of relief, Ben thanked Maria quietly before leaving the store, his mind swirling. The sign of. She had missed the signs of odd behavior and emotional distance. Everything was clear now. Kathy had been leading a double life, a revelation that had eluded him. About a month later, Ben learned that Kathy had started living with a man named Roger from Hearsay. Surprisingly, Ben felt no emotions, no anger, no sadness, just a sense of relief. Kathy was no longer his responsibility. Ben had also started to move forward. He met Lisa, a woman who embodied everything that Kathy did not. Lisa was warm, sincere, and kind with no ulterior motives. Their connection was effortless, devoid of the tension and manipulation that marred his previous marriage. One evening, as they sat on Lisa's sofa watching a light-hearted romantic comedy, Ben found himself genuinely laughing, a rare occurrence after years. This seemingly insignificant moment represented a significant change. He was no longer stuck in the past, no longer second-guessing himself or dwelling on past mistakes. Ben had taken back control of his life. What are your reflections on Ben's journey? Share your views in the comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. More tales of strength and fresh starts are coming your way, so stay tuned.